Well, good morning, everyone. Um, and welcome to our webinar this morning about using Infor OS components together to solve a business problem. MJ put this together for us um, originally back as part of InPower, and it kind of ties a nice bow around some of the technologies we've been looking at over the years, and and lets us see how they work in harmony. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to MJ and let him introduce himself. And I'll be watching the venue chat for questions, and we'll try and. So if you have any, put them in there, and we'll bring them up and talk about them as they either as they come or talk about them at the end. So MJ,
Like,
go ahead.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you. My name's Hari J. Mangalam, and MJ comes from my last and middle initial. I thought I'll make that clear. In the info world, I go by MJ. Phil and Brian and the LX user group, they asked me to do this presentation, and like Phil said, I did this at Empower. Um, some of the components that I'm going to talk about, or the version of Infor OS that I've used for this presentation or demo, is the multi-tenant version of Infor OS. However, I want to make it very clear upfront that if you're using an on-premise version of Infor OS, everything that I'm going to talk about today is applicable there as well, and I'll highlight any differences along the way while I do this presentation. If there are any subtle differences between the on-premise version and the empty version of the tech stack. Um, I'm based out of the UK, so I work from the Solihull office here in the UK, and I pretty much work with Dave Rapaz and the other solution consultants in the sales organization. So the use case that we're going to use today, and I will talk about it once you've actually seen a video, because it's quite self-explanatory once you see the video, and we'll see what drove that use case, what was the thought process behind that use case. But we chose a use case, or I would rather say the use case came from the user community. It came from one of the LX customers, and we wanted to see how we could leverage the different components that make up Infor OS, or the technology platform of Infor, in order to fulfill that business requirement. Now, like all solutions, there are alternative ways of doing the same thing, right? And I'll visit that at the end of the presentation, as well. I've chosen a specific path in terms of how we integrate back into LX, the putback, if you will, into LX. But there are other options as well. So the components that we are going to talk about today is of course the portal, and then info development framework, which is really an integral part of InfoLX now. Whether you use it for personalization as your front end to LX maintenance, or to bring about some extensibility into the core ERP. It's just part of core LX. So you've got IDF, and we'll see how IDF helps us achieve some of the things that we want as part of the use case. Of course, you've got Ion Connect and Ion Workflow. The use case is a workflow, and then what typical for those of you who have been using Ion, say in the past decade or the last 5 years, you've used it predominantly as an asynchronous, publish a board, consume a board, do something with it kind of pattern. And that's one of the subtle differences here. The put back into LX, and in this case, it was made possible because the version of LX that I'm using is 8.4, is actually using REST APIs. Okay, so that's one of the probably the differences from those of you who use InfoOS. And the way you work with it, and then of course Info Document Management, which is the document archive, document repository, a full-blown document management system that allows you version control, check-in, check-out, all of that capability in there as well. Obviously, we're not going to go into the details of every single component, but we're going to see what the technicalities behind the implementation is. Okay, so I'm going to start off by playing this video, and then I will talk about the video as you watch it. Okay. So I've logged into InfoOS, and then what you're seeing here is a workspace. In version one, this would be called home pages. Okay, so in version two, it's a workspace. I've got a bookmark for vendors in LX, and I've just clicked on that, and it takes me straight into the list of vendors. Activate the filter row, and this is all part of core IDF. And Once I select the vendor, I'm going to change the vendor or maintain the vendor, and change the bank account details. Right now, someone who's able to do this is obviously authorized to do it in LX. Right, so they have the authority or the authorization in the ERP to be able to do it. What I'm going to do is navigate from the default view to one that I've created on my own. So it's a personalized view in IDF. And then you can see that there's a new column there called approval status, which now says that it's pending. Right, so something's happened behind the scenes which has caused this approval status to change to pending. Now, when the approval is, or while the approval is pending, if I try and maintain the bank account, let's see what happens. So I've got some validation in LX that's telling me that there's a pending approval, and therefore I cannot change the bank account anymore. Okay, so a couple of things that's happened in LX here to enable the workflow, right? What we also do when the bank account is changed is we change the attribute hold payment, or we toggle that switch to yes, and we also set the hold date. So this is all happening in LX. Now, when the vendor is maintained, um, there is some information being sent out of LX, and we'll see what that is, which has created a task for me in this case, where it's giving me the details of the supplier's bank account that has been changed. And I've got a couple of drill back links in here. The top one, which is called document, when I click on that, it's going to navigate to Infor document management, right? And you can see that there are no attachments or documents for this vendor. There's a second drill back link, and when I click on that, it takes me into the details of that vendor. And if I hover over the bank account details, I can actually see the maintenance history. Now, again, there's an IDF feature where I can see who has changed that bank account. So it gives me a history of everything that has been changed. So typically in a demo, we would do what we call as a happy flow, which is the approval workflow. I thought I'll actually cover a rejection cycle as part of the demo. So I'm going to reject this task. But as part of the rejection, I'm going to enter a note, which again is a standard capability when you get a workflow task in Infor OS. And I'm going to say I'm going to reject it because there was no supporting documentation for this bank account change. So you can see I'm a bit obsessive about spelling mistakes and spelling errors here, but I'll save the note soon, and then I'm going to reject it, right? So when I once I've rejected the task, let's see what happens in LX. Um, right, I'm just going to refresh my view, and the approval status would change from pending to rejected, right? So because I've rejected it, and what you can also see, what we also do as part of that is we capture, and again now I'm changing to a personalized view here. We also capture the details as to who rejected it. In this case, of course, it's me, and the comment or the note or the reason for the rejection back in LX. Okay, so all of these extensions um, come into play because of IDF. And now what I'm doing is I'm changing my preference to approvals rather than the LX default, so I can keep using it as part of the demo. So again, personalization or the personalization capabilities that IDF give you is something that we are leveraging, right? So there's been a rejection. I'm the user, and now I'm going to upload a bank statement as proof to say that the bank account has changed. You can enter some metadata associated with that document if you like. It doesn't have to be that way, but that's what I've done. And then I'm going to resubmit the same transaction or the same vendor bank account change for approval again. And you can see that the approval status has gone from rejected to pending again, which means there is a task, an approval task, pending somewhere for me to approve. Okay. So there it is, and this time I am going to drill back. So the approver is, you saw the two drill backs. The approver can click on the document link, and when they do that, they'll now see a bank account statement giving you proof of the bank account change, which has got the name and the address of the supplier and their bank account details. So as an approver, if I'm happy with the supporting documentation, I'm going to approve it. And the same approval task is also available in the Info Go app, which is the mobile app that allows the approvers to action any tasks that are assigned to them. Right. So I've used the mobile app to approve this task, and then that information is now going to go back to LX, and approve the vendor. In this case, if I refresh my list, um, it's still going to remain in pending status. So let's refresh that list. And the right, it's still pending, although I approved it. If I go into the details of that vendor, you can see that now the default form that's opening up, or the card file, is the approvals card file, and it's recorded my approval. And the reason it's still pending is just for the sake of the demo. I've got two levels of approval set up, right? So I'm the first level of approval, and then I've got David Foster, who's the my colleague who's set up as the second approver for this workflow. And this is just to show you that you can have multi-level approvals as well. So right. So what I'm going to do is, because I'm the administrator, I'm going to assign it to myself, and I'm going to approve David Foster's task on his behalf. Okay, very very quickly. So once I've done that, and the approval for the bank account details, uh, the status of the approval would change, will go from pending to approved, and then you would also see the list of approvers um, in LX. Okay, so um, that's the that's the use case, right? And also what you see is the payment hold flag, which we set to yes at the very beginning, is also released, so you can make payments to that changed bank account of that vendor, or for that vendor. Okay, so the use case is a workflow or an approval process when a vendor's bank account is has been changed. Again, you have certain set of authorizations in LX as to who can make that change to that bank account, but you might want to vet that change or authorize that change through a workflow, by having someone else review it, make sure that there is some supporting documentation. So really to prevent any fraudulent transactions or payments out of your ERP, really. So that's the use case, and the video kind of shows you what that entire flow would be. So what did we see? What happened, right? So the first thing is, we logged in, and when we logged in, and I clicked on the bookmark vendors, I was not prompted for my LX credentials, my IBMI credentials. So what you saw was single sign-on in operation. You can do that today if you have an on-premise version of Infor OS, or if you subscribe to Infor OS in the cloud. It doesn't matter. It's federated authentication. It's made possible because of Infor STS, and LX supports that. You can deploy LX as a service provider to enable single sign-on. So we saw that, and of course, the enabling single sign-on comes with other benefits. So if your identity provider has multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication configured, then you can use that as well. The next thing we saw, which is again, this is slightly different in Portal V2, which is only available in the cloud, and from what you have on premise, is that in the on-premise version you would use the app switcher, which are the dots on the top left corner in this screenshot, to navigate between different applications. So between document management and, let's say, LX, for example. But in Portal V2, you get tab navigation, so you can simply click on the tabs to navigate between the different apps. You had the capability to have bookmarks, even in version one. Of course, the workspaces brings the different widgets that you can use to configure your homepage, is now part of workspaces. And then you've got the applications as well that you can navigate to from the navigation menu on the left, which again, in the version one of the portal, the Mingle portal, you do it using the app switcher. Um, the um, the other big difference between the Mingle portal and V2 is the fact that you can drag the contextual apps, so you can enlarge them, to see some additional to see more details of the view. So you can see that, you can actually split the screen, if you will, and see additional content, which is a limitation in the Mingle portal. Okay. Um, So what the next component that, if you remember on our slide, was info development framework, and all the additional information that you saw in the workflow. So for example, there was a column called approval status. All of that is made possible because of IDF. And for those of you who already use IDF, the application tab that you see is integrator. So for the approval status, I've used one of the user fields on the vendor master. And for those of you who are familiar with file names or table names, it's one of the user fields in the AVM table. Um, for uh, for to record the reason for rejection, I've got a new table, and I've created in integrator a simple text object, right? And then I've got another table which has got the details of the approvers, right? And those tables have been converted into business objects using integrator. So you have the vendor master, and then the vendor master has got a one-to-many relationship with approvals, and the approvals has got a text relationship with the reason for rejection, which is the text object. And then finally, we have a logical change transaction that enables the resubmission of the bank account change when once it was rejected. Okay, so it's these are all capabilities that you can leverage and use today in LX, using IDF. Right. So I've not changed any line of code in core LX to make this happen. It is all done using the extensibility framework or the extensibility capability that IDF brings to the table. There are a few other things. So if you remember, when we made the bank account change, it changed the approval status to pending, and it also put the payment hold, set the payment hold flag to yes, and that is done in the update database from buffer, right? And then there was a validation where once the change has had been submitted for approval, you could no longer go in and change the bank account details, and that was done in the user exit, which was the edit buffer. So again, capability within IDF where you can activate those user exits and then include a few lines of code. This literally is the few lines of code that was added to make it work. And that's all there is to it. So by just a few lines of code, you've changed the status, you've updated the flag, and then a few lines to check if the approval is pending, so you don't let people or anyone change the bank account details until those tasks have been actioned as part of the approval. Okay, again, this is all standard IDF. And then we saw some personalization capabilities, right? So we were able to create a new view called approval, and then I added the approval status in there, right? And then similarly, in the vendor details, I created a new form which had details just relevant. So it had the payment details, and then it showed me the details of the approver. So all of that is part of IDF as well. So that's what we did initially. And then we saw that there was an approval task. Somehow it appeared magically in Infor OS, that I actioned contextually. The rejection was done contextually first time, and then the approval was done using the mobile application. So what triggered the workflow, right? So again, LX has had this capability for a while now, where you can set it up to publish boards at the end of a transaction cycle. So when you maintain a transaction or master data, if you will, in this case, in LX. So um, LX has been configured to publish a supplier party master board, but there is a subtle change in the sense that we're using the LX extension to include those user fields that we have as part of the vendor master. So we know in the data flow there's been a bank account change. Okay. So we're publishing a board, but as part of the but before we publish the board, we've got a PI instruction, if you will, that's going to include the user defined fields in the user area section of the supplier party master board, and that's the bottom half of the PI instruction that you're seeing here. So the board is published, and then it's consumed by an application connection point. So we're going to review this from left to right, and they are numbered. So 01 at the top is left to right again. Is the application connection point is an adapter that is basically polling for these boards that are being published from LX, and then it picks it up and it says, okay, 02, which has got the supplier party master, it's a supplier party master board. So the first activity, if you will, in the data flow is to check if there's been a change to the bank account, right? If Because that's what the workflow is all about. We are only going to trigger, or create tasks if there's been a change to the bank account, and that bank account change is now available in or the flag that shows that the bank account has been changed is now available in the user area section of the board, so we can create a filter using that property, and then do something with it. Okay. So in this case, yes, the bank account was changed, and it's going to move on to step number 4, where we are going to add some or enrich the board with some additional user area details, which is going to be used to record the approvals as it happens in the workflow. Okay. So this particular trigger or the entry point is not a workflow, so we're not using an activation policy, but it's actually a data flow, and the data flow in turn is going to trigger the workflow. Okay. So we're still at point 4, where we're saying we're going to add some user area sections for approvals. The supply party master board by itself does cannot hold multiple approval levels that we have in this particular example. So you can extend a board by uploading your own schema extensions in Ion, which is what we've done. So we've created, let's say, additional XML elements that's going to sit in the user area section again of the board. We've called that approvals, and we've uploaded that as schema extensions in Ion. Okay. And then once that is done, we are going to trigger the workflow, which is step number 5. Okay. So we trigger the approval workflow. And what does that approval workflow look like? It looks something like this, right? So the first, pretty much the first or the second activity in this case is, within the workflow, is to try and determine the approver, because the supplier party master board is not going to tell us who needs to get the task, right? So we're going to get or ascertain who the approvers are as part of the workflow, and then we check if all approvals have been completed. That is based on the fact that there are no more approvers, and if there are any approvers, then it's going to follow the bottom branch, if you will, not the top branch, the bottom branch, and then we're going to create an approval task. If there has been a reason for rejection, then we use the Ion API capability to go and get the reason for rejection from the previous task. Remember that we entered the reason for rejection in the notes section of the task, and then you can use an API to go and read those details from those notes. And then we simply record whether whether the task was approved or rejected, and then that ends the workflow and hands it back to your data flow or document flow, right? So how does the workflow check or ascertain who are the approvers? In I think this was introduced in 2021 or early 2022. I don't know the exact version, but there is this concept of business rules in InfoOS or Ion. It's within it comes within the workflow tab, monitors and workflow tab, and you can set up the parameters based on which you're going to build those business rules. And then the definition tab is where you set the conditions. So in this case, it's very, very simple. I'm saying, okay, it's coming from this instance of LX, which is my logical ID. And then here's the accounting entity that I'm going to use. And then I've got a parameter which is called level. So in this case, I've got two levels of approval. The first one being me, and the second one being David Foster, which is what we saw in the demo. So the workflow is going to using an API, which is the business rules API, is going to determine who the first level of approver is going to be and who the second level of approver is going to be. Now, what is the biggest advantage of doing this? We are not hard coding anything. So tomorrow, if your business rules change, if your organizational hierarchy changes, all you have to do is come and change the rule and not touch the workflow at all. The workflow will take care of itself. It's going to reuse the configuration or the definition that you have as part of your business rules once you changed it. Um, so it's the workflows ended or not ended. It's come back to the document flow, and the next activity, which is step number 6, is where we check if all approvals have been completed. And you have to imagine this: all approvals completed is the top half, and all approvals have not been completed, which means there are more approvers who to whom we're going to assign task, is the bottom half, which is number 7 here, right? So if all approvals have not been completed, i.e., it's false, now it's very simple. We're going to invoke a REST API to log that approval, right? Whatever response we get, and that API call under the covers is using system link to create the approver details. And we essentially are using, and this is a transformation step which is only available in the cloud, which is the Python script. You can run a Python script, but there are other alternatives on premise as well if you want to merge the outcome of the API with the board itself. Okay, so that's what we're doing. We're merging the API. And then we've got a transformation step, which is step number 10 on this slide, where we record the approval details. So if you remember, we had a schema extension where we are record, which enables us to record the approval details or to capture the approval details in the board as it flows through the approval process. And that's what we have. We have a style sheet transformation which says th- he- I was the last approver, for example. Okay. And then we funnel that supplier party master board back into Ion, right? Because not all approvals have not been completed. We have more approvers in our business rules who need to approve or reject this particular bank account approval change. And for that, again, this is standard Ion capability, Ion Connect capability. It's available to you on premise or in the cloud. It doesn't matter. We use the Ion messaging service and the IMS Ion API connection point to send the board back to Ion. And then what happens? It goes back and it goes through the same flow again, right? Where it checks, it creates approval task, approves, rejects, logs that back into LX. That's the putback, and then checks if all approvals have been completed. So that's what it's doing. So the IMS application connection point gets it, and then it goes through the whole approval workflow again until it gets to a point where it says all approvals have been completed, right? So that turns to true. There are no more approvers in the in my business rules, so it's gone through my approval hierarchy. And then finally, it uses a final update back into LX to say, the bank account change that was initiated is either approved or rejected. Okay, so that completes the document flow. So there were quite a few API calls in there, and I just wanted to talk through some of those. So one of the things that I used in this document flow or workflow scenario is the Ion messaging service, which was used to send us the supply party master board back into Ion when there were additional approvers. So that's the IMS messaging service. The workflow used the business rules API to determine who the next approver was, depending on the level of approval that we had configured. We used the tasks API to get the reason for rejection, right? We use the IDM API to create the drill back link, right? To see if there were any supporting documents attached for the task. And of course, we're saying this is all deployed in the cloud, but it's also available on premise. Each one of these is available on premise as well. Now, what was in terms of recording the information back into LX, so updating LX when the approval was approved or rejected, or logging the approvers, that was done using a REST API, and the API suite was deployed into the Ion API gateway. Now you can do that. You can do that today, but it's something that you need to code. So this is a component that I wrote for the demonstration, and under the covers it uses system link to do all the updates. So because it's at 8.4, using system link ensures that I'm following all the business rules and the edit checks that are in place during vendor master maintenance. But that capability is essentially just exposed as an open API specification, right? And it's made available in so the actual REST service itself is deployed on the in a subsystem called IDF server, and that's what I wanted to highlight here. And then finally, you also saw Infor document management, where we've created a document type called IDF bank statement, and also defined a business context model that links the document to the vendor in LX, right? So it's the business context model that enables the in contextual capability in Infor OS. Okay, so that was done as well. So the workflow use case that we put in place, which is approvals for bank account changes, was done using 8.4.x. Right, I say 8.4.x because it's going to work with 8.4 and above. But what if you're at 8.3.5, right? And you wanted to implement a similar kind of workflow, how would you do it? Because your maintenance of the vendor or the bank account change is going to happen uh, through WebTop, for example, right? It's not happening through IDF. So there were a couple of, if you remember, there were a couple of user exits that we used, IDF user exits that we used to identify if the bank account had changed. And when we identified that the bank account had changed, we set one of the user properties on the vendor master, and we also put the hold from payment flag on hold. So you would do the exact same thing using a very lightweight DB2 trigger, where you can then check if the before and the after image to say, has there been a change to my bank account details? And if there has been a change, then do the exact same thing, update, put the payment flag on hold, and update that user flag, and that user flag then tells the document flow that there has been a change to the bank account, and that user flag is published using a PI instruction. In our case, if you looked at it, we said let's just publish all the user flags in the user area section of the board. So you can do a one-time change, and then if you wanted to use additional user fields, you could do that as well. And then finally, we had a validation. So if you remember, once you've made the change to the bank account and an approval has been triggered, we prevent anyone from changing the bank account again until the approval has been actioned, right? So that's done again using IDF. You probably will have to use an LX exit point to put that validation in place. Okay. Um, in terms of getting information back into LX, so whether you want to log the approver details or to release the uh, the payment hold flag once the approvals have been actioned, you can always do it using a PI instruction, okay, as part of the LX extension. That is definitely possible, but there is also an alternative approach that you can take, which kind of enables that REST capability. The alternative approach that I'm showing here. You have a business object in 835 for the vendor master. It's inquiry only. It doesn't allow maintenance. You have to go to 8.4. However, in integrator using IDF, you can create a business object transaction, your own, called approve, right? And that business object transaction will give you a set of user exits, which is what I've listed here, or which is what I've shown you here, which is the process buffer user exit. And in that user exit, you can release that payment hold flag, if you like, um, and log the approvals as well. So there are a few things you can do here. And then once you have this business object transaction, it becomes available through system link, and you can have a REST facade, if you will, over system link. And other option, an alternative option, is if you don't want to build that REST capability, then you can use what we call as what was put in place several years ago, a sync IDF request custom board. It's a custom board which is essentially just a wrapper around system link, and in which case it's not going to be in line within the data flow, the update back into LX. It'll follow the asynchronous pattern coming back into LX. But you could use that as well. And for those of you who are wondering, how do I get hold of the sync IDF request board? Log a support ticket, and we'll make it available through a KB. Okay, so that is something that you can request, and use if you're familiar with system link. Of course, you need some system link knowledge education to use that board, because it's essential. It's exactly what it says here. It's a board wrapper around the IDF API, which is system link. Okay, that's my presentation in good time. So we have a good 15 minutes for any questions.
So there's a question in that says we use XA. I think we could put a workflow in place in XA similar to what was developed for LX. Is it recommended that we would need Infor OS in the cloud, or would on-prem allow you to do what you demonstrated?
The answer is straightforward. Everything that I showed you today is possible using an on-prem version of InfoOS.
Eh,
So if you've it's come from Candy. So if you've got InfoOS on-prem today, everything that I've shown you is doable using that version.
And Carolyn mentioned that during the video you approved on behalf of was it David? And I'm
That's
assuming you
right.
did that because
That's
you were an administrator.
That's right. That's right. So you've got security roles in InfoOS, and like any application, you need an administrator. So I have the administrative authority that allows me to reassign tasks to myself or others, and your approvers will not have that authority, that security role attached to them, so they won't be able to do it.
Okay. Charles asked if we use XA, should we still log a support ticket for the sync IDF bod to wrap around system link?
If you are an XA user, I believe those the boards are available in the IFS. I'm not 100% sure about the exact location. I think Charles log the support ticket, and they will point you in the right direction. Yep.
A follow up on the approvals from me. Um, what about out of office? How is that? How would something like that be handled?
Right. So there is out of office delegation in InfoOS. So the person who is out of office would set it up and delegate their tasks to whoever they want those tasks to be delegated. And once you turn that on, the task would automatically be assigned to the person to whom those tasks have been delegated. So
And that's
that's just a standard feature in InfoOS.
so that's up in workspace or home pages, right? That's where that's at.
In Mingle, exactly. It's a configuration in Mingle within user settings. So once you've logged in, the user can go into user settings and set up their out of office in there.
Great. Any other questions? Uh, from Charles, can you recommend some kind of quick start document that would help us set up a link between XA business object, such as item revision, and a document such as engineering drawing?
Charles, can you elaborate on that, please?
Because I was thinking the same thing. You did a lot of steps through here, and I'll have to watch this video a lot of times to try and figure out what you did.
Right. So what I did, I can talk about the demo while Charles is typing. Um, so if you look at the IDM piece, we created a document type which is extremely straightforward. So if you go into IDM and you go into the control center of IDM, one of the possibilities is to create your own document types, right? So when you look at IDM, once it's provision installed, you've got a generic document type which you can use. Nothing stops you from doing that. But you can also create your own document types, and you can associate some metadata with that particular document type. So in the example that I used, I created bank statement, and then I had the LX supplier number or the vendor number as one of the metadata attributes, and a few other details, bank account and the bank name, for example. And it's the business context model that links the LX, let's say the LX business object, in this case the vendor, and the document type in IDM. And that is done using an XQuery expression. So Phil, if you go back and you look at the video, one of the screenshots will actually show you that XQuery that links the two together.
Got it. Um, Charles wrote back, the piece I'm missing is the business context modeler, how to link the XA item business item
Right.
revision business object
Right.
with an
Okay.
engineering.
I understand. I understand. So the business context model, like I said, is an X query, very similar to an X path. And what you do is it starts off with the entity name, which is the document type, and then uh, will we be able to go back and watch it? Yes, it's being recorded, so you can watch it, Caroline. So it starts off with the entity name, which is the document type, and then you filter it based on attributes, which is the attribute metadata that you define in the document type. And how does so for example, let's take an example, right? So we had a document type called IDF bank statement. In there is a metadata property called vendor, right? How does that vendor relate to the vendor ID in LX? LX publishes the business context message, right, which is the JSON. And in that JSON, one, the key would be ID1. So if you look at the business context model, and there'll be an X query which says, for IDF bank statement, I'm going to link it using the vendor metadata attribute, and that needs to be equal to ID1, which is what is being published in the business context message, the JSON.
Excellent. Daniels wants to thank you for your great work, but he wants to know if you can estimate the time it took to develop this workflow.
Daniel, that's a very subjective question that you're asking me, because it depends on what you know, and what your skills are. But to give you a rough ballpark of what it actually took, given that my LX knowledge is limited, it's getting better by the day as I work with Dave Rapaz and people like Phil. Um, I would say a couple of days.
One last question. Can you speak to the level of Infor OS education on Infor
Right. So, InfoU is a great place to start for InfoOS education. Obviously, because that education is generic, in the sense that you can't have an education on a technology platform that is specific to an ERP. So it teaches you, or it gets you started on all the different components, in terms of, and if you I can take an example. If you look at Ion, for example, it'll talk about the different connectors, how to configure them, so on and so forth. But once you've done that education, I would recommend working with Ryan Thomas and his team, the LX Professional Services Organization, to take that education that you had and bring it together with LX, to bring the ecosystem, if you will, of the technology platform with LX, because there are some nuances with regards to how what you need to do in LX to make it work with the tech stack, both outbound and inbound. So I would say great place to start for InfoOS education, InfoU, and then maybe as a follow up, you could reach out to Ryan Thomas's team to get a few days education with regards to with something that is specific to LX.
MJ, thank you so much for putting this together. It was a great presentation. Looking forward to watching it several times to try and see exactly what you did here. Um, and look forward to seeing you again next September, perhaps in another InPower. We'll see if we can't come up with
Absolutely.
something else for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
Phil.
much.
See you guys.
Take care,
Yeah.
everyone.
Bye.